Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for a very special presentation, The Future of PR, Driving Growth with Relevant Content. I'm Vasil Azarov, Online Events Manager at Business to Community and producer of the Startup Marketing Conference. Today's webinar is brought to you by the Startup Marketing Conference. Startup Marketing Conference is kicking off in San Francisco on March 27, and it will bring together an incredible lineup of real-world digital marketing practitioners, including today's speakers, as well as growth hackers from Online Marketing Institute, WhatsApp, Dropbox, DocuSign, Hootsuite, and more. To learn more about the conference, you can go to startupmarketingconf.com. Our partner for today's webinar is SF Beta, the voice of Silicon Valley and San Francisco premier startup mixer. Launched in September 2006, SF Beta brought together tens of thousands of founders, investors, technologists, and executives year after year. Before we get started, a few housekeeping reminders. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link within 48 hours of today's broadcast. If you have any questions for our presenters today, please post them in the chat box at the bottom corner of your screen. And if you would like to tweet key takeaways from today's webinar, use hashtag StartupMarketingConf. I'm very excited to welcome today's moderator, Christian Perry, executive producer of SF Beta, founder, technologist, and world-renowned host whose work has been featured, just to name a few, TechCrunch, the Boston Globe, VentureBeat, and widely across the Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. His company, Empirically, co-founded with Michael Gold in 2013, connects the top people worldwide in emerging technology and innovation through events, summits, and destination experiences. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Christian. Christian, please take it away.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Basil, thanks for that amazing introduction. Much appreciated. And thank you all for joining us for this really exciting conversation. I'm here with Vanessa Camones, the CEO and founder of the Mix Agency. And before I start by introducing Vanessa, I just wanted to reiterate, Vasil, if there are any questions that people have, feel free to submit them through the chat room or through the Twitter hashtag StartupMarketingConf. And we like to be as interactive as possible, so we'll make sure that we can get all of your feedback into the program. So with that, Vanessa is here with me, and I'll do a quick introduction of her, and then we'll get started. As I said, Vanessa is the CEO and founder of the Mix Agency. She's been working in high-tech public relations and strategic communications for over 15 years. Her agency has grown to represent New York City, LA, Portland, and, of course, San Francisco. Some of her clients and people she's worked with include Pixar, Hewlett-Packard, Samsung, SGN, SendGrid, and many, many more. As CEO at the Mix Agency, she leads all client communication strategy and product marketing and loves every minute of it. And especially, she has a soft spot for startups. So Vanessa, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me. Hey, everyone. Actually, I was just thinking how we met at the first SF Beta in 2006, so it's kind of crazy to think about all the years that we've been doing this. So this is exciting.
It all comes full circle. Awesome. All right, so let's get started. So Vanessa, you've talked a lot about how the traditional model for PR is broken. So how does traditional startup PR work, and why is the model broken?
Yeah, so this is something that, over the last, I would say, 8 years, and especially now that it really hurled me into starting the agency and to starting the Mix, is typically what you see in a traditional PR model is a very press release centric, very tightly controlled, kind of one-directional message that's focused on a one-way conversation with your audiences. And with the sort of new model and new ways of people connecting on social, live, and so many different ways to really take your message to another level, unfortunately, a lot of traditional agencies have struggled to catch up to those models. And because of that, we've got, sort of these two different ways that can, help each other in essence, because you can't really completely get rid of the press release, right? Although many of us practitioners hate them, but we also know that we need them, especially when you have a public company or something of the sort. But again, there's been situations where the PR teams or the agency doesn't get brought into, the more strategic discussions or has a seat at the table, which today now you're seeing that shift a little bit more and having a more tight presence with the social media teams and also the entire marketing organization. So for us, and the way that we look at things today is, social media really is also part of your marketing strategy. It's also part of what you do, and it's tightly integrated with all of the comms that you do. So I think the model's been broken because it happened so fast, and unfortunately, not all practitioners were able to ramp up and understand how to use Twitter, how to use Facebook, how to communicate differently within those channels. And so more and more, I think you're seeing, startups being affected by this, but also huge corporate, Fortune 1000s, Fortune 500s.
Who actually does still read press releases?
We still do a lot of press releases, believe it or not. So the reason, that people, we look at press releases in several ways, and a lot of the time it's for legal reasons that you want to push out a press release, right, to legally put out there, like, we have a product, and it goes out to hundreds of wires, and you sort of put it out there. A lot of journalists still get press releases so they can still see. It's also a way to still be able to talk about your product or talk about your funding or, let people know about your earnings or an IPO or things like that. So it has the factual information in it. So it's a very factual document that comes directly from the company that's public. And so once it's out there, once that statement, right, that public statement is out there, made to the public, then people can take all of that and either regurgitate it or it in other, articles that they're writing and things like that. So the press release still has a purpose, but clearly it's not your entire content strategy, and you should certainly not rely on it to get press nowadays.
Okay, and speaking of content strategy, let's jump to our next topic. What's the deal with content marketing? In a recent survey of business leaders, content marketing came out as the single top priority for organizations when asked to identify what they thought was their most important goal as marketers for 2014. So why does content marketing matter? How can companies get it right? And what are some mistakes to avoid?
Sure. So, first and foremost, this is something that is near and dear to my heart. I've been in the content strategy business since, early 2003. I was working with one of the first web content management systems on the web called Adams, and then I went to do content strategy at Cisco. So content strategy is something that was one of the fundamental reasons why we founded the agency. And today, the way that people think about, and we've always heard this term where people say content is king, right? Content is king, but essentially, like, what does that mean, and why does it matter to your organization? But I think more importantly for startups, right? I think that the first thing today that you need to think about when you're developing content is first your website, right? That's the place where you first start telling your story, like creating an identity for you as a company, for your product, for your service. So having a really good website is actually really critical to your business. And it's something that we really, truly try to help our clients get to that place, because if someone's going to go to first look at, it's sort of like first impressions, right? When you first look at someone, what do they look like and what are they saying? And if your website copy is a jumbled mess and nobody can really figure out what to do, that's a problem. So I think that that's one of the first things that we talk about when we look at content strategy is all of the components that make up your entire communications and marketing sort of infrastructure. And the other thing I think that's really important as you're looking at your company is creating a story and a narrative. And we hear this a lot. I'm sure that you guys see this on Twitter all the time, like narrative building and storytelling, and they've actually become sort of like these crazy buzzwords, although they're actually really, really important. And the reason why they're so important is because although they're products and services that are very highly complex, right, and they're complicated, you still need to, in some way, shape, or form, make them relevant and humanize their story and make people relate to them or understand what they do in a really simple, succinct way. And what they say about writing is that the simplest writing is the hardest writing. So the more jargons you throw out there, the more complicated and the more nonsensical your stuff's going to look like. And so one of the things that I think is really critical is that you want to tell a story, you want to build a narrative that's compelling. A lot of the time you want to bring someone actually that may be external or is an expert in this to help you in your company, to talk to your CEOs, to talk to your product teams, to really help you get out of your own head. Because when you live and breathe your product in the startup, you think you're the hottest thing on earth, you think you're, the slice of bread that
everything universe, right?
Yeah, and so you really get into it, and you're in your head, and so you can't always rely on your own self to look at the market externally and look at it in a way that you can then take what you've built and apply it and say, this is how we fit into this ecosystem, or this is how we fit into the narrative of the way that trends are happening and people are telling stories. So you have to think about your message and your story and your content as a living thing that's always changing. It's always shifting. And that's one of the things that, today is really important to look at when you're building your marketing team or you're building your product marketing. You want to be able to also understand the different distribution channels and your audiences, and we're going to push out that content, right? So there's your social. So this also can include your community and your blog because you control that as well internally. There's also the internal stuff. So how you communicate internally to your team and to your investors and partners and all of those things are also really important. And so the internal comms of it is also really key because you want to make sure that your team is always informed and understanding that you guys know what you're talking about and you're all saying the same thing. So when you're out there selling or you're out there trying to create new partners or opportunities or evangelists or developers, bringing them on board to your product, you want to be able to all be saying the same thing and telling the same story and all be in agreement of what you do. And then you have your external marketing piece, right? You've got newsletters. You've got webinars like this one. You have events. You have road shows and any other, off the ground or offline or ads or anything like that. That's your external marketing. And all of those channels and all of those things, right, all need to have good copy, good content that people understand and they make them want to act on or they make them want to engage with you. And that's tough. So as you get to a point that you feel that you can take some of this in-house or you can find a good partner to help you, you really want to find a good writer. And those, to us and to me, I love people that can write and can read and love research because we can show you all the rest of the stuff, but to really be able to take difficult concepts or to take, what a product is or what a service is and translate it into something meaningful, it's really difficult. So finding someone that can write, that enjoys and understands sort of how to connect with your audience is really important. So those all these channels, right, the ones I just discussed, they all need to be tightly coordinated, integrated. So singing the same song, telling interesting stories, and understanding, what each channel and how people interact in each channel, right? Because the stuff that you're going to tweet isn't necessarily going to translate to your Facebook, if you need one, that is, or your LinkedIn. Or if you're doing Instagram, if you're a consumer, packaged goods or service, right? They're all very different, and they all you want to have them be coordinated. You want to be doing the same similar campaigns and structuring campaigns around them so that you can also measure, right? People forget about content, but content can be measured, and that's also really critical about it. And that's why, more and more companies are caring about it because you can actually measure these things and see how they do and tweak your message and see if people are resonating. Like, today we're seeing already how many people have joined our, how many participants we have, and that's fantastic. Through the webinar, we're going to see how many people are here. So I think all of those things are really important. And then, having a message that resonates and content that's educational, thoughtful, opinionated is also key. People don't want to hear how great you think you are. They want to hear it from other people. And so that's the toughest thing, right, is to have other people singing your praises and telling your story. That's a really difficult thing to do. But they can all tell that story, right? So the way that you engage with them, the way you create these relationships, that's where also PR does come in, right? Because the PR piece of it can also help you have a better connection with your customers and tell that story. Talk to press as well, right? Help you connect the dots there. But those are sort of the ways that you can think about your content landscape and your content ecosystem, and then work really closely with your product teams and work really closely with your executive teams to always make sure that you guys are in sync about what you're saying externally and internally.
Great. And one of the major developments that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly with the boom both of blogs and then of social, is the fact that that the message and the content is coming from a lot of people and going in a lot of directions. And I think that's a good transition to our next topic on conversation versus control. So Vanessa, when you're talking about content marketing and storytelling, I think a lot of people, when they think about their companies, still imagine like a single master narrative that is coming from the entity of the corporation itself. But that ignores two really important points. One, that everybody working for the company is active on Twitter and Facebook, along with a lot of other sites, or can be. And two, so are all of your customers. So
right.
In terms of crafting a story, how do you do that when everyone has their own perspective and wants to share it?
Well, that's where the internal piece comes in, right? And one of the things that is really critical when you're giving your employees, access to information and having them share it, I think you have to be authentic. And people say authentic all the time, and it's also another buzzword, right? But it is. It's true. You want to have people feel comfortable, and when you say something and when you talk about, a big corporate sort of initiative or something, to give people the ability to participate, right? So that's where tools like Yammer, tools like Podio and Salesforce can come in and really help get your sort of entire organization on the same page, right? Because you have the ability to participate as an organization and have people say, hey, I'm thinking of this and I want to get involved in this. And participation of your employees, I think, is really critical and key as you look at more and more of the way that the sales channel is building out. It's becoming social, right? So there's social sales and there's, marketing that's very social in nature. But all of those things need training, right? You need to have training. You need to have guidelines. You need to be able to hold people accountable also for what they say, and that it's correct and that it's true. So a lot of companies today, they have trainings that you work with your team to make sure that, they can answer questions, and if they don't, you filter it. Basic rules of sort of like media training, right, of traditional PR still apply to this. It's, you want to be able to respond and have the correct responses on any social network and have the feedback come back in and filter it to the right people. So always saying you don't know something or you don't know the answer to something, that's okay. Like if you're not the engineer, but you see a Twitter, you see a tweet that's like, and no one's answered it, and you filter it, or you say, hey, we're going to get back to you. Like, you have to have that sort of also team mentality where you're all sort of in this sports kind of, analogy, if you will, where you all have to be working together to make sure that you can continue that social presence that is going to help you, have people respond to you and know that you're doing it right. And I think that some of the time, companies get really freaked out. They get worried, and with they do, but a lot of times it's because they don't actually work or have someone in-house that can help them navigate all this, that can help them put structure to it. So that's where, you if you hire someone in marketing or you hire, an external team or a consultant to come in and work with you to really be able to put parameters around that and put infrastructure around that and use the right tools and use the right analytics tools and look at the data. And there's always a way to respond to things, and there's always, answers and solutions, but you have to go about it in a very, I think a smart and honest way with your employees too. Even as you're learning and as you're growing, you have to keep that in mind. So it's not just about...
Let's jump to a question from Erica that ties into that. What metrics do you use for measuring content effectiveness for blog content? And I would expand that to say, what about other forms as well, say like Twitter and Facebook and so on?
So depending on, what you want to get, I mean, a lot of companies today still rely very heavily on Google Analytics. A lot of people also are using things like HubSpot, are using things like Contently, are using different, Wildfire, like all these different kinds of measurement tools to look at, who's coming to my site, like where is this content, being popular or not, and then taking that and whether it's also Twitter, or Facebook Analytics or whatever it is, you want to make sure that that content and that you're seeing it be engaged or shared or whatever it is, the social distribution side of it is, because there's a lot of paid. There's a lot of things that you pay for, especially today, like on Facebook, right? You still have to pay to engage because Facebook has actually put a lot more walls for brands or for fan pages and things like that you really have to still pay for that and engage in that so that you can see how it's doing. And then as you do that, the algorithms change, right? And people can see. So it's a combination of tools, I wouldn't say. And today what we've also seen over the last year, you've seen, companies like Oracle, and you've seen companies like Salesforce, sweep up Google. They've taken a ton of analytics companies and they've bought them. And so now they're part of their actual internal measurement tools that they sell to companies to be able to measure and track. So like the Radian 6s of the world are now part of Salesforce. You have it's part of Salesforce. So all the tools that we've used are now pretty much under one of those big, cloud and marketing companies. So that's sort of how you would look at it, and working with a team and having a team that understands how to look at that data and how to best present it also to your marketing team. You want to be able to have that and have that analysis to be able to say then this is what we're going to do next, or this isn't working for us. We want to try something different on another network or a combination of things. So it's always moving. It's always changing.
Yeah, and speaking of moving and changing, we had another question from Yervant. What is the difference between content development and content marketing, and how do they fit into thought leadership?
Absolutely. So content development is really the actual writing of it, the process of it, right? Like, how am I going to develop this post? And there's a process for that, right? You've got to do the research, the brainstorming, the coming up with themes, getting it back to your executive team, having them sign off on it, right? The content marketing piece is, how am I going to distribute this? Where am I going to put this? Am I going to place it on a VentureBeat? Am I going to place it on, the next web? Who are the writers or who are the editors that manage those for me to be able to get them posted? Am I going to use Facebook? Am I going to use LinkedIn? Am I going to pay for it? Is it going to be an advertorial, right? Or am I going to use something like HubSpot to manage all of that for me, or Contently to help me produce that content? And so the thing about it is, when you have a difficult product or service that, if you really need to make sure is clearly defined and people relate to, it's tough to just shoot off your whole marketing, kind of content marketing off to, a content farm, right? A place that just writes content all day. Some of them are constantly have editors, and for some companies it may work. Others, whether it's very enterprisey and very technical, it won't, because those writers aren't, they don't have the experience and knowledge to be able to write that kind of content, so that can be tricky. So one of the things that you're seeing more and more today is, agencies and also organizations create their entire content teams and editorial teams and have writers on staff, which is why you're seeing a lot of reporters, right? They're dropping off to go in-house to help write and help run that, because it actually runs very much like an editorial machine. It's like a newspaper. Right? So you have to have editorial cycles. You have to have an editorial calendar. You have to know exactly where the channels and which ones are going to go out and when. So there's, deadlines, and there's posting dates and all that. So kind of like a blog, but on crack, like on a whole different scale. So there's just a huge, it's a process. And to start it up, right, and to start that process is, if you don't know how and you don't have the tools, then you want to bring experts to help you do that. You want to bring a seasoned team that can help you sort of navigate all of that, because it can be overwhelming, because there's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of people that can tell you they know what they're doing and then they don't. And you also want to be able to leverage it in the right places, right? That's the most important thing, is you want to make sure that your content is going to the people that are actually going to read it and share it and care. And that's one of the hardest things, right, is the audience piece, the audience segmentation. Where do you find them? Where do they live? And that's not always easy.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that brings us to our next topic about where the action is. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, the entire traditional media. Brands. So let's talk about Facebook in particular, because they're the 800-pound gorilla right now. And over the last few years, we've seen brands putting a lot of their marketing efforts behind Facebook, to the point where when you watch a commercial now, they don't say, like, come to our site. They say go to our Facebook page, which is a major shift in the way that companies are branding themselves. But increasingly, Facebook is restricting the reach of all companies but the highest bidder. As you were mentioning, there are more and more walls getting up, and the only way to get through them is to hand Facebook a big sack of money. So what are the effective ways to engage with your audience on Facebook, and what are some alternatives?
So, it's really interesting that you asked me this, because I have a very kind of opinionated perspective, particularly on Facebook. I'm not a huge fan
Go for it.
Of folks pushing their audience to Facebook. I'm more of a fan of building your audience on your own site and owning that, owning their emails, getting their own information, building it organically. And some companies have a harder time doing that. If you're a brand, like a consumer packaged good, like, a gum or an artist or, the different brand, there's a different reason why you're going to be on Facebook, right, depending on the campaign and the engagement, like if you're a Chipotle or if you're an Arby's or whatever, right? And there are, companies, and there are, like Expion, for example, does a really great job, and they manage all of your entire social media ecosystem and the tweets and the data and all that, and they're very good at that. But for Facebook specifically, how can you manage? If you're a startup or if you're a smaller, medium-sized company, chances are you're going to get really frustrated really fast, because you're not going to see conversion to your product. You're not going to see a ton of engagement, because Facebook continuously wants you to spend so much money just to engage. Where does it benefit you most? I would say doing webinars like this, building your own newsletter, right? Building your own email list of folks that you see at trade shows, that you see when you do smaller events, when you go out and evangelize. You utilize your network, your sales channels, your sales team, and start building it slowly. But then it's yours, and then if you're using a good email infrastructure, like MailChimp or SendGrid, if you're doing it in-house or something, you can really manage your own audience and know what to say to them and know how much they're really clicking and all that good stuff. I mean, Facebook gives things to you to a point, but when they're not actually allowing you to reach the right targeted audience, then it becomes really hard. And if you want to have engagement with that audience and you're a smaller company and you can't afford, to spend that much money, it's frustrating. The campaigns we've done for clients on Facebook, a lot of the time, they get some views and some traffic, but they don't amount to conversions. Just like, you say a TechCrunch article isn't going to amount to conversions. You're going to have a spike on traffic for, 30% spike, and then it's going to drop down. But out of those people that read that article, how many people really converted to use your service, to give you their email, to participate in some way, shape, or form? So that's when it becomes really hard, right? Because you have to look at different ways to leverage all of these different channels and utilize them, and all of the things that you can do besides just Facebook. I think people rely entirely too much on Facebook, and they should be thinking about other ways to also take that budget and maximize it for things that are going to get them more closer to the right audience.
Let's talk about Maxime's question. What is a good way to prove social ROI to the C-suite? So, talk a little bit about social ROI in general, since it's still an evolving concept, and then also talk about how you can get the executives of a company who might not be coming in from a social networking point of view to understand just how important it is to drive conversations through social media.
It's at the end of the day, it's the data, right? Like the piece of it is when you utilize like a Hootsuite, and you're utilizing an Expion, or you're utilizing Salesforce, or you're utilizing Google Analytics, and you're utilizing all of these different things to track and measure, and you're starting to look at forming and creating campaigns, right? Like I always say, social media is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And the problem, I think, that happened when social media first, the first wave happened, is that it was so new, and everybody jumped on this bandwagon, bandwagon, and they just like, I'm a social media guru, ninja, I just totally know it, and it's amazing, and you guys all need to do it. And a lot of these companies started throwing a ton of money at it without any results, because guess what? There weren't enough people on it yet. So there wasn't yet the mass amount of people checking in, or checking their Facebook or looking at LinkedIn. But because of mobile devices, right, because of the proliferation of mobile and being online all the time and having access to these, we slowly moved into a place where now social has become critical. So it's not so much where, I still have to prove the ROI. I think they know. I think most C-levels understand that there's a huge opportunity for their sales force, for their marketing. It's now about them having those budgets to test and try, and working with a team that really understands how to leverage social and utilize data, right, to create more opportunities. And that takes time. So, your CEO has to be able to understand that and know that the landscape is still really early. I mean, mobile is still super early, and social, although we have a ton of tools and services, they're now getting integrated, right, in the cloud and with all of these other systems, and they're becoming more reliable. Whereas before you were piecemealing sort of data from this place to this place to this other place, they're slowly starting to become more integrated, because, you've got access to different APIs, and you have access to different data sets from different apps and different social networks that you can build a more intelligent and sophisticated social media program. But in the beginning, we didn't have that. That didn't exist. And so now that, we would fast forward, I'd say, since 2005-ish to 2014, you got to stop banging down on the ROI door. You got to start thinking about how do we make it work and what's right for us, and start asking the right questions instead of just saying where the dollar signs, right? And with social, it's about
there was a after Black Friday, there was an article that came out that said that for e-commerce, email was something like 46 times more effective, and that's times more, not percentage more, 46 times more effective than social in terms of generating sales. So, if I'm the CEO and I'm reading this article, what can be said to me that can make me understand why social is still important, even if it's not going to be the primary generator of, say, leads or sales?
Because people are everywhere, right? Your audience is everywhere now. So sure, 46% of women that are looking at their email and, being the head of the shopping in every household, yeah, they're probably going to be the ones that are the most that are shopping. So it's a very specific kind of demographic. But if you look at where millennials are and where, men are in college and all of these different constituencies, if you don't have a presence everywhere and you're only putting all of your eggs in one basket, then you have a problem, right? So, and then we're talking more about big brands here, right? We're not talking about like smaller companies, startups that have like very specific goals, and there are different phases in their growth, right? So, from just a actual from a startup mentality, right, you're going to be slow and steady. But if you're a brand that you can have millions and billions of dollars on advertising and on all kinds of campaigns, you're going to have a full-on digital strategy, right? That's just not just content. It's a full-on digital. You're going to have commercials. You're going to have still inserts in the mail. I mean, you're still going to have snail mail. You're still going to have email. So it's not just one thing. So.
And what if you're, say, a 7-person team? How are you everywhere with so few people?
With how many?
Well, yeah, hypothetically, let's say you're a 7-person team, you're a 20-person team, you're a 2-person team. How do you create that presence while still doing your job?
Well, let's be honest. You really kind of can't. I mean, it's really difficult. And if you're a founder and you have a product and you have a developer with you, social is not going to be your priority, right?
Right.
It's just not. So, you have to, at that point, be really strategic. Get really good advisors, right? Have a good advisory board team that can help you navigate all that. Figure out the priorities of when and at what growth stage you should be bringing in consultants or an agency or, a marketing person, right? Because you have to be very deliberate with your budgets, with your action, with the way that you look at your entire productivity, right? And how your product's going to get out. So when you're first, sort of heads down as a founder, you shouldn't be, you should be focused on building that product and getting your funding, not tweeting, So, I mean, that's just the way that I advise, the startups I advise. But overall, there's a method to the madness, and there's certainly a phase, right, in which you, as you're growing and as you first get your first seed, your first seed, you should still care very much about your presence, right? And you start with the website, and then you build from that. And then if it makes sense for you to have a blog so you can actually start letting people know what you're up to, you build that out. And then if you start having more time, or you can bring someone in part-time or an intern to start helping you tweet and you train them, that would be great. But these are all hypotheticals, right, because every company's needs are different, right? App developers and gaming is very different than consumer packaged goods and enterprise. So it's really critical that you're also really well aware of your audience and when it's right to build this infrastructure and these pieces to reach those audiences, right? What maturity level you need to be at.
And I wanted to bring in an earlier point, especially with content marketing. In 2006, 2007, the CEO of Sun Microsystems did something that at the time was considered very radical, where he encouraged all of the employees of Sun to start their own blogs within the company. Do you think that that's an advisable strategy for other companies to emulate, or do you feel like it's more important to have like a single centralized message, or is there sort of a happy medium in between?
It's really interesting that you say that, because that was around the time 2006, 2004. So it's very interesting. I remember this a lot, and at the time, a couple of years beforehand, is when we'd introduced a content team at Cisco had introduced blogging corporate, and it was a big debate. It was an incredibly huge debate, and Cisco was very much on the fence about it, and I would have meetings with the teams about, what is it, that why should we do this? Why should BUs do this? Why should it be important? And if you look at what Cisco's done today, which I was part of this team building the newsroom. So the newsroom at Cisco is essentially what the content team did. And it was essentially a ton of different ways and blogs that BUs did, not individuals of the company, but the business units had. And you could, post customer stories, and you could drive, awareness about what your team is doing and the products and the services, and develop it into you also controlling your own message for the products and the services and all that good stuff. And it's a model that's really, really worked very well. For a CEO to say to their entire team, just start your own blogs and whatever, figure it out, like that's not right. I think that's a terrible idea. You want to be able to give guidelines. You have to understand too that blogging is a commitment. Okay, so if you're just going to tell employees just go blog and they only post forever, that brings nothing to the company. And they're wasted time on trying to get up a WordPress or a blogger back in the day and be like, oh, how am I going to manage this? No, you need an integrated approach. So if you're going to blog, they can participate, but have one central blog where people can contribute content to, have the right tag cloud, have all the right infrastructure. Where yes, of course, we want people to participate. We want them to give us content, but you need to do it under the umbrella of the entire corporate organization.
And with some kind of editor to make sure that the content stays on message?
100%. Yep.
Do you think it's important for leaders within an organization to have their own independent voice as well?
I think so. I think depending on the leader, depending how their comfort level is, depending how committed they are to having it be a long-term, activity. You don't want to just start your CEO having this Twitter account and him not really participating, and then it starts off really fresh and good, and people are starting to follow him, and he's getting all this feedback and all this good stuff, and then all of a sudden it just stops, right? That's something that you really want to be very careful about. You want to have a very open conversation, very candid, very honest, and say, this is a commitment. And today, you guys, the truth is some CEOs manage their own accounts. Many don't. Many have their, head of comms manage it for them. And it's not typically their own voice. And so when you do that, you also have to be really in the CEO's ear and have a really good relationship with that person to know that, you're going to be tweeting on behalf of that person. And some of the biggest organizations in the world today, they have someone in-house that's very tied to the CEO that manages their social, and that's their job, and that's what they do. But they're committed to that, and that person, is sort of the shadow of the CEO in social, and writes all their content like a speechwriter would, right? So, it depends on the situation, and it depends on the comfort level of that CEO wanting to be in the spotlight.
Gotcha. So we're getting towards the end of our conversation. I wanted to thank everyone who's given their questions so far, and we still have time for a few more. So if anyone listening wants to ask their question, we'd be happy to take it. Moving on, Secret. Secret has exploded over the last however many months. And Vanessa, you wrote a really influential article that got published on TechCrunch about
Yeah.
secret, particularly why organizations should be aware of it and possibly a little bit concerned. And can you tell us why?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of insane what Secret's been able to do, right? And the stuff that
And just give a background on Secret to people who may not have heard of it so far.
So Secret is an anonymous, right? So it's a app that you can put in. Although how anonymous, I'm not sure, because now you can also put in your location. So the location, I mean, there's all these things with Secret that I find really unsecretive, but it's secret because it's just anonymous. It doesn't have your name on it. And people can just post anything they want, anything that comes into your mind, whether, they hate their CEO or they just bought amazing shoes and spent too much money or, all kinds of stuff. And so it's really taken off in the Valley, and it's become, a very high school hallway whisper kind of app. And that's how I think of it. One of the things that, though, I think is important for communications practitioners and also for companies that you're all vulnerable, right? Everybody now is vulnerable to Secret, and anybody can say anything about a company or what's going on internally at a company or what they think of a CEO or all kinds of stuff that sometimes you really don't want to get out there. You don't, or is it's not. It shouldn't be out, and it should be completely NDA'd and all that good stuff. And people are putting all kinds of stuff that can jeopardize the company and can jeopardize all kinds of stuff from funding to having a huge leak where you might lose a partner because of it, or you could lose the entire deal because it showed up on Secret. So some of the things that we talked about, and this was something that our team, as a mixed agency, we were very involved in, was discussing these kinds of apps, right? Because Secret isn't the only one. There's several others, and all of them are getting ridiculous amounts of funding.
Yes, and they're all being stalked by Gawker.
Yeah, and so it's one of the things that it needs to be part of your crisis comm strategy. Right? So should anything leak out, how do you manage? How do you do it? And you take control of it, right? It shows up on Secret, and you need to push it out, through your social channels and know that it showed up, and be able to say, hey, we're commenting on this formally from the company, and refute it, right, before it actually snowballs and other people take it to it. But it comes directly from you, and you knew what happened, or it got brought to your attention. And I think you also need to have internal guidelines, too, with your company nowadays. So actually HR should be also letting them know, because what happens, and I think, Christian, you and I talked a lot about this when we last saw each other, was what happens when Secret's users are revealed and their data gets hacked into. And, your name pops up with all kinds of crazy stuff that you talked about, and your company, your CEO, and it gets to HR. Because it can happen. We have social. We've got Valleywag. We've got all these ways that people can.
Unfortunately, yes, we do.
So we do, right? And so you better make sure that you've read your terms of service and also your employment agreement, because 99 out of 100% is that you have a confidentiality clause, which means none of this should even be showing up on Secret, whether anonymous or not. So I think that there are things that you need to think about, and as a crisis strategy from a communication standpoint is just have it ready. It's the same way as when any data gets leaked, right? You guys all remember when Snapchat, their data got their user stuff got hacked into, and they waited. I wrote a post about that too, and they waited and waited and waited to actually say anything. And they have millions of users. And that just made the company look so bad, and it actually made the CEO look really, really bad. And so I think that you have to think about how that's going to affect your brand. Hiding under the rock is impossible because they're social, and you're going to be scrutinized. So you need to think about that as well. If you don't know how to go about it, if you're having a really hard time, figuring out how to talk to your internal team about, highly sensitive information that shouldn't be leaked and stuff, like talk to a professional, talk to, a trusted mentor or a VC or somebody that has really good communications background to help you through stuff, because it's going to be needed, because you're going to see more and more crises come out. And, we haven't even touched on the stuff where, there's the suicides and there's the bomb threats and there's all these kinds of other crazy things that can happen through these apps that we're probably not even prepared for, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see these kinds of apps be used for good. But as you know, what's used for good can also be used for very, very bad things. So
yeah, it's all in the hands of the users. So we've covered a ton of ground here: content marketing, social networking, Facebook versus non-Facebook, single messages versus multiple messages, the best way to drive perspectives from a large group of people. Vasil, I think, just chimed in with a question to wrap things up and bring us towards our close. What do startups need to do today, and what should they be paying attention to, besides secret, I suppose, to transition from the pre-PR era to the future of PR?
Are you asking me that, or are we just?
I'm asking you that. What else should people be paying attention to now, as they transition to a post-PR era?
Okay, honestly, mobile. You guys have got to understanding mobile marketing and how it's going to impact your content strategy, because it will. And from ads to campaigns to content being distributed through different mobile channels, how can you leverage that medium to your advantage? So I think now we're really moving into not just online, but also mobile web and what that means, and having all these different apps and having all of these different devices is you really want to be able to have, like they say, like a multi-screen, a liquid experience, and being able to have your brand, being able to showcase that you understand how all of these different mediums work, I think is really critical.
Yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things that I advise any company is to make sure that they have a responsive site. And responsive means it works across tablets, phones, and the web. It's amazing to me that a lot of major companies and brands, even today, have sites that don't render on an iPhone. Isn't that insane?
I think it's terrible. I mean, I think you really need to think about having everything working seamlessly across all devices. And it's something that, slowly more and more people are paying attention to. There's so many websites that I see, and we haven't even touched ads, Right. That's a whole other ballgame. But it's changing and it's shifting very quickly. And also, social consumption is happening more and more on mobile, and sharing is happening more and more on mobile. So you have to also think about analytics and data and measurement on that medium as well than just online. So I think it's important to get yourself looking and reading. Knowledge is power, and reading. And there's so many people that are happy to offer information and best practices and all that good stuff. So the best ways to do it is to follow folks on Twitter and LinkedIn and see the articles that they write and the stuff that's out there, because it's shifting really fast. Both just in marketing and comms, all of it is changing so much. So,
who are some of the people you follow, and what are some of your favorite blogs?
I follow obviously Brian Solis, Charlene Lee, Rebecca Lieb, I absolutely adore. She's phenomenal. She's with Altimeter Group. She writes everything, and if you do content, you must read Rebecca. And I mean, she's kind of like the Bible for me, and I followed her work for years. And she's wonderful. So those are some of the people, before, Jeremiah I follow because I like what he's doing with the crowdsourcing, crowdfunding stuff.
Jeremiah Oyang?
Yeah, Jeremiah Oyang. And so those are some of the people that I, think that are doing really interesting things. On the other sides of it, on everything else, I just read a lot of different websites. So, everything from media posts to advertising week. It's kind of interesting and weird, but I actually don't read as much PR stuff as I used to in the early days of my career. So I know a lot of people read Bulldog Reporter and PR Week and stuff, and I think they're still good and they have a lot of stuff to offer. And of course, Social Media Club and what they're doing as well. I do follow closely. And other stuff. It's just kind of one of the things that is interesting is we've worked with so many companies that do a lot of the social and analytics stuff in our day. So it's funny for us when we look at now. Finally, people are looking at content and social and the way that we had hoped 3 years ago. So. We're a weird hybrid of an agency in that way because we do work with really early stuff, and then we see it come to life later on, and it's really exciting. And for mobile, I think that Mobile Marketer is actually really good. I read a lot of Fierce Wireless and blogs as far as tech blogs and stuff. I'm really always on Tech Meme. I think Tech Meme just gathers everything I want to know all the time. So I'm not, biased towards one single publication per se. Although I'm a huge, but I love Tech Meme because it just takes everything. And if you're going to subscribe to anything in the tech community, I would say do the information. I think that what Jessica Lesson is doing is phenomenal, and their stuff is really, from a content perspective, is really on point with the stuff that we really care about, and a lot of insider stuff. They really get it. They do informative pieces. So I'm a big fan of the information.
Awesome. So that's all the time we have today for our conversation. For everyone.
Thanks everyone for joining, and have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having